Intent and obstacles. What are they? How can you apply them to your novel to make the greatest novel possible? We're going to be looking into those and more, and we're going to be starting right now. As a writer, you can write a scene. It can be exciting or it can be boring. It can make the person reading want to turn the page quickly, or it can make them close the book. But how do we make someone want to read your novel? What is that one thing that you can apply to your stories and make the greatest book you can ever have? Well, the answer is intent and obstacles. What does that mean? It means whenever you write a scene, you want to give your character an intent. They want something. There's something out there they need to acquire. Not something that they would like to, but something that they need, that they can't go on without it. However, you don't just want to create a scene with intent. You want to give them an obstacle, something that's going to stop them, get in their way. You don't want someone just wanting something, acquiring it, and then walking away. You want someone to have an obstacle. That obstacle can be anything. It can be a person, it can be a place, it can be the weather, it can be themselves. But as long as there is some form of obstacle stopping your character from getting what they want, then that is going to create tension. Tension is what makes us want to read on. If you're reading a story with someone sitting around and they're just chit-chatting with their friend, well, there's no obstacles, there's no intent, there's no want. You as a reader don't feel any passion to turn the page. But what if somebody had a want? There is something they need, and that all of a sudden creates tension. But with the obstacle, now that person cannot just get what they want. Now it makes you, the reader, really want to turn the page to find out how are they going to solve this problem. To give you an example. Imagine if somebody wanted to walk into a room. Does that sound exciting? Not really. Now imagine if somebody walked into a room and they had to find and pick up a piece of paper and walk out. Yes, there is intent. It sounds very straightforward. But what if that person had to pick up that piece of paper because there is information on it that will stop a world war? Now all of a sudden, we've added energy to that story. But there is no obstacle. That person can walk into the room, pick up the paper, and leave. Okay. But what if there is a guard dog? What if there is a dog sleeping there that if you wake up, you're in trouble? Now all of a sudden we've created an obstacle, something as simple as a guard dog. But now we've made it interesting because now this character needs to get into this room to get a piece of paper that's going to stop a world war. That is their intent. But there's an obstacle. The dog is sleeping and you can't wake up the dog. So now with this intent and obstacle, now all of a sudden as a reader, you want to turn the page. You want to know if this individual is going to be successful at getting this piece of paper to stop a world war without waking up the dog. Simply by creating intent and an obstacle, we have created something interesting. Now, a lot of people think that intent and obstacles apply only to thriller novels. You can apply this to any kind of novel, be it romance. Look at Romeo and Juliet. There is a story about two young teens who were in love and want to be together. Sounds straightforward. That is their intent. But without an obstacle, that story is boring. Now let's create an obstacle. What did William Shakespeare do? He created parents who were at war with each other, who wanted to keep their kids apart. And they wanted to be together, but their parents wouldn't let them. We've now created an intent, and we created an obstacle. By putting those two together, we've now created a story that you want to see how this ends. Imagine if Romeo and Juliet were just two people talking, without any intent, without any obstacle. All of a sudden, the story has no meaning. You have no desire to turn the page. You have no desire to see how it ends. But by creating an intent and an obstacle, we've now created tension. And that tension is something that you want to see resolved. Whenever someone reads a book, they put themselves into that book. They become the protagonist. Anytime you have ever read a novel, chances are you have put yourself into that story. By creating intent and obstacles, you've now created tension where you picture yourself in the novel, wondering how you will get out. You're not thinking about how the person in the story is going to get out. You're now worried how you are going to get out. You have now created tension in your own life that you now have to turn the page to find out how you are going to get out of this problem. You don't want to just close the book because you're leaving yourself in this tension. You want to find resolution for you to have that resolution in your own life. Because anytime we read a novel, the person reading puts themselves into the novel they're reading. As a writer, you have to know that anyone reading is going to put themselves into your protagonist's mind. The protagonist is the one you write about, but the person reading, they then become that character. When your protagonist has to face intent and obstacles, creating tension, the reader is now the one facing those obstacles. Because what is novels? It's all come down to one thing: answering the question, what will happen next? It doesn't matter if you're writing a comedy, a drama, or horror, science fiction. It's all about wanting to answer one question: what will happen next? And when you create intent and obstacles, you force that question to exist. Without intent and obstacles, the question, what will happen next, does not exist. By putting in an intent and putting in obstacles, you automatically create tension, automatically leading to the question, what will happen next? Forcing the reader to have to turn the page. And when you create intent and obstacles, you're also doing something else. You're creating emotion. Because emotion is what makes us want to read on. When we feel, we want to read on. Chances are, if you're reading a book and you don't feel anything, that is when you close the book. But as long as that story is making you feel sadness, anger, happiness, you will keep reading. And intent and obstacles automatically create tension, making the reader feel something. And that something is what makes them turn the page. Of course, when you create intent and obstacles, you want to make the answer difficult. If someone can solve a problem really easy and quick, it doesn't have the same effect. It doesn't make the reader want to turn the page that quickly. The more difficult you make it for your protagonist to solve the problem and overcome the obstacle, the more the reader is going to want to turn the page. And always remember to put your protagonist in the greatest amount of danger. That is what makes someone want to turn the page. Give your protagonist a massive amount of intent and create massive amounts of obstacles. That creates a massive amount of tension that makes the reader turn the page faster. Don't make things safe for your protagonist. Make things difficult. Give them a lot of intent and give them a lot of obstacles. That is going to make someone not be able to stop reading your novel. If you want to make your story boring, it's really easy. Just have everybody get along. Create no intent. Create really easy obstacles that someone can overcome in a blink of an eye. If you do have people just standing around talking with no intent, the reader isn't going to feel anything, and they're going to have no desire to turn the page. It's really easy to kill a novel, and it's really easy to make a novel great, because it comes down to intent and obstacles. Before you write a scene, ask yourself, what is the character's intent in this scene? And what obstacles can I create that's going to stop this individual from reaching their goal? Remember, the obstacle does not have to be another person. It can be weather, It can be yourself. It can be an animal. It doesn't necessarily have to be another person who is evil or someone who has a gun. If you have to get from one point to another and the weather is stopping you, that is an obstacle. If you yourself, through shyness or insecurity, cannot achieve your goal, then that too is an obstacle, but it's within. If you want to make your story really interesting, give both the antagonist and protagonist both intent and obstacles. So that way, your lead character wants something, and that information is within the antagonist. The antagonist not giving up that information is the obstacle. But the antagonist also wants something, and that comes from the protagonist. But the protagonist isn't going to give up the information either. This now creates great tension, because now both characters in the scene want something. And remember, the obstacles and intent don't have to be massive. They don't have to be about changing or saving the world. It can be just something as simple as wanting to acquire something very basic. And the obstacle can be very basic. It doesn't have to be massive. But as long as there is some form of intent and some form of obstacle, it will make the story work. Remember, when you create an intent and obstacle, you want to have some form, some kind of a negative outcome if the goal is not achieved. What is the negative side of the protagonist walking away? Why can they not walk away? You have to give them a reason to want and have to stay to solve this problem. And you have to know what is the negative outcome if they do not achieve their goal. This adds and makes intent and obstacles even more powerful. In The Exorcist, the goal was to free a young girl who was possessed by the devil. They cannot harm the girl because the goal is to save the girl's life, but the devil does not want to give up this girl's soul. So the priests have to figure out a way to free this girl without harming her. There is intent and there is obstacle. The obstacle is the devil. If they do not free her, the girl will die. So they have an intent, and the obstacle is massive. It's the devil. This makes us want to turn the page when reading the story. The author knew to create intent and an obstacle, and they did so throughout the entire book, making us want to turn the page. They cannot walk away from this. If they do, the girl dies. That is the negative outcome from walking away, forcing them to deal with this obstacle, and they have to achieve their intent. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out my website, where I have a ton of information that I have to offer you on how you can become the greatest writer you can be. In fact, I'm going to leave a link to my website down below in the description, and you can visit my website right now and become the greatest writer you can be. In fact, you can ask yourself a question. How does telling a joke help with writing a novel? Well, I have a video for that. In fact, you know what? I'm going to leave a link for that right here. And you can watch that video right now and learn how a joke and writing a novel are linked.